Hi everyone, welcome back. It's my AK Swedish Whiskey Girl, and today we're going to try something quite new. So we have here Wireworks. So this is from the White Peak Distillery in the Peak District. I think it's in Derbyshire, and I think that's how you pronounce Derbyshire. I always struggle with those names because I don't know, I just doubt myself. But we're going to try their new mixed spirits, which, let me see, this is a 55% ABV. It is unaged, of course, and lightly peated. Yeah, and then we're gonna try this, which was released, I think, was it the 3rd or the 4th of February, so it's quite new. Released in a batch of 5,000 bottles, their first single malt. And it's an English single malt made with English barley. And name the first release. Gonna double check this. So it's a 50.3% ABV, it's also lightly peated. It's the first batch, 2022, and I think they have more batches planned. And it's matured in STR, so shaved, toasted and recharred, and bourbon casks. I am going to admit I have tried these, a little peek before this because I was too excited. But I'm really excited to try them again and really think about it. So this distillery, White Peak Distillery, is based in England, like I said, in what was originally an iron forge until 1876, I believe, when it was turned into Wireworks, hence the name of the whiskey. And they have quite an interesting history, so I can definitely recommend checking them out. I believe this first batch might be sold out, but I'm going to keep a close eye on them moving forwards. So we're going to start by having a little nose of the new make and then have a look on the whiskey. There's something so nice about their new make. It's just so fresh, but it's like it's clearly new make. So if you've noticed new make, known like the essence of new make, which is that kind of, smells a little bit like paint, which reminds me of my, like, was it in kindergarten when you used to have like after school classes, and no, it was like the first few years of school when you used to have after school activity things and you got to like play with paint and stuff, and it reminds me a little bit of that, minus the alcohol perhaps, but it's like a nostalgic note of a paint, but also mixing with like fresh fruits, like citrus fruits or plums, but quite it's like the essence of them, like almost like if you would put them in quite a savory perfume. And I don't know why, it feels very purple to me, like almost like I'm thinking if it smells like lilacs maybe, or the ones that are it's like a flower on like a stem, but they have tons of little flowers that go out on the sides. I'll put up a photo because I can't remember what they're called, but I love those flowers. But let's have a little sip. Sláinte. Still has that touch, and I don't know if, I think you only get this if you like paint. I've obviously never eaten paint, I don't think, but it's that almost chemical note. Some people might recognise it as acetone instead. Obviously don't eat acetone or drink it, but it's slightly chemical, or that kind of alcohol note. And then this has almost like a toasted biscuit note, like it's like almost a bit like cookies, which you don't expect on the palate, and then it's surrounded by all these fresh essence of fruits and citrus, and almost like a herby note as well. I really like this new make on its own, and it's quite nice because I didn't have much of a connection to Wireworks before I tried these samples. And then the new make really surprised me, and I was like, I really like this. And then moving on to the whiskey, I also like that, but I can't quite remember what I thought of it. So it's nice to see that you like the starting thing and then you build on it with casks, because it gives them a clear identity. And the lightly peated note, I'm not gonna lie, I barely get the lightly peat, the light peat. But I'm also a bit peat blind sometimes. You probably know this if you watched the channel before. Like at the end of it, if I'm thinking about it, but I don't know if it's my brain telling me that there's a bit of peat there or if I'm actually getting it. So let's move on to the whiskey. And if you don't know this, shaved toaster recharred casks, which a lot of people are using at the moment, or a lot of newer distilleries are using at the moment. A lot of people describe them as casks where you get a quicker extraction of flavour in a shorter period of time, so you kind of almost get the effect of I don't like saying that it matures quicker, because it matures in the exact same time as everything else, because you can't speed up time, but it can give you the kind of impression of a whiskey that's matured for longer traditionally with the use of STR casks. But they're quite popular and they've done some really interesting stuff. And I'm quite curious to see how they're going to develop moving forwards, if more renowned distilleries are going to use them as well, or if they're just almost like a gateway cask to get you started, but they've seemed to be doing some good things. So yeah, interesting cask. This is almost a bit like black currants, but a bit of biscuits as well. So I think the biscuit now I'm getting on the new make, I'm actually getting on the nose with whiskey. Quite a fresh note and a youthful note in the way that it's fresh and alive rather than it being underripe, if that makes sense. Let's have a little taste. Sláinte. On the palate it feels quite dark straight away, like like a bit of floral notes, but also a bit of biscuity notes, but also some fruits. Probably like, it feels very dark purple again, so I'm thinking of like plums or some sort of blackberry compote thing, jam maybe. It has sweetness, but it doesn't feel doesn't really feel like a fruity sweetness. It feels like almost like an artificial sweetness, like almost like maybe a candy sweetness. Quite viscous, like it has a lot of body to it. It feels a bit like a dram you'd want to sit in like a leather armchair and drink, because it just has this atmosphere to it that feels darker. It's hard to describe because it's that purpleness, density about it, but at the same time it's quite alive and fresh. Like in the way that I'm not really getting any underripe flavours, which you might sometimes find with younger whiskies, but instead it just feels very alive. Like it feels like if you ever known a kid who's like bursting at the seams of like energy, that's a bit like what the characters in the whiskey. So if you have quite an old whiskey, maybe a 25-year-old or something, they can feel like they're quite calm and sitting back, like an older person who's like seen a lot in their life, and they just like have this calmness within them, whereas this really does feel like someone who's starting to get very round around the edges and like really interesting person, but they have so much energy inside and just want to burst. But still has a lot of balance, which is interesting. Also has a bit, and especially on the last, like, so when you taste it, usually I almost have like the start, the middle and the end of the taste before you go over to the finish. And at the end of that first taste, you have this toasted woodiness, which feels very robust, which I don't mind because it's not too bitter. And then it goes over to a warming finish. The finish for me doesn't have a specific definition. There's that warming aftertone of the wood. Yeah. An interesting whiskey for sure. And like I said, I'm going to be very curious to see what else they're going to do. I'd love to hear if you've managed to try Wireworks, if you perhaps live in the area and you know a little bit more about them. I'd love to learn a lot more about them, so please let me know in the comments below. And of course, I hope you'll join me in my next video, and if you don't want to miss them, make sure to put on the bell for notifications and subscribe if you haven't already. And of course, if you're curious to check out my other channels, I have put a link to those in the section here below, where I've also put links to my Islay guide if you are curious about that. But like I said, I hope you'll have a lovely day, and I'll see you in the next video. Sláinte Skål!